Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Blitt, Director of the BAFF Film Festival. Thank you for being here for our panel this morning, or I should say this afternoon. We are going to speak for about 45 minutes, and this is being recorded, so if anybody misses anything, it will be on our YouTube channel in about a week. And again, feel free to share that video as well. We appreciate that. Anyway, I'm going to start this off by handing the mic over to Danica, who's our moderator, and everyone's going to introduce themselves and we'll get this started.
Perfect. Hello. Thank you, Jonathan, for having us. My name is Danica Waldo, and I am a director, writer, and producer who lives here in New York City. And I'm really honored to be moderating today. I actually had the world premiere of my debut short film, Sally Get the Potatoes, here in the spring edition of the Big Apple Film Festival. It was a wonderful experience. It's such a great homegrown festival, such energy and passion. And honestly, it was a joy to kick it off here. This has been such a wonderful festival ride for us, and to start it at Big Apple in return is a blessing. So I'd love to pass the mic down and just have everyone introduce themselves, your name, and what film you'll have showing here at Big Apple in the winter edition of 2024.
Hi, my name is Melissa Ann Archer. I am a writer, actor, video editor, producer, and my film is called Side Up.
Hi, my name is Gloria Brown Marshall, and my film is Before 1619, She Took Justice, about Queen Nzinga, who was a warrior queen and diplomat in Africa in the 1600s. And it's going to be December 11th, Wednesday. It is the block from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I am started off as a playwright, and I'm a writer generally, and writer-producer of this particular project.
Hi, my name is Dan Freed. I am a writer-producer, and my film is called Driven Out. It's a psychological thriller short about a former high school bully who meets up with one of his former classmates who gives him a tip on a rideshare service that winds up transporting him to another dimension where people are essentially punished for the things that they have done, for their former misdeeds. So I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and I have a wife and a couple of great kids. So that's my background. Nice to meet you all. Thanks so much.
Perfect, thank you. You've all got the memo of the mic passing. I love it. So just as a writer's panel, that's what we're really going to be focusing on today, but also, a trajectory of your career. We would love to know a little bit about how you got to this point in your career, what you've learned so far, and how you've evolved to this state of being able to have such a great short film in this wonderful and prestigious Big Apple Film Festival. So if you'd like to share anything about your journey and just how you got here today.
When I was a freshman in high school, I had an extra slot in my elective and decided to sign up to film class, and I fell in love with filmmaking and when I was 13, and thought, oh, this is also fun, and decided to do both and kind of rearranged my life so that I was doing both. And I always viewed them as two very separate careers, because I think in film, being an actor and a woman, they, don't really take you that seriously inherently. And, I felt like I was always kind of trying to prove something, that I take this very seriously, separate from my acting career. And that I didn't just want to be seen as an actor, but I wanted to be seen as a writer and a director and someone that was on the production side. And when I went to college, I studied both very separately, still kept them separate. And then I moved to New York and was still viewing them as two separate careers. And then about a year in, I was auditioning and I was like, why am I still viewing this as two separate careers? This is one and the same career, and I like doing both, and they inform each other and they help each other. And so I was kind of tired of keeping them separate, and so I was ready to marry them as one career. And so I sat down to write something that that informed each other, and that's where Sunny Side Up came from. And it was about writing something that felt, true to myself, and something that I wanted to be a part of, and something that other people wanted to be a part of, and other people seemed to like it, and I was able to get it made, and that also seemed to be easier and better than auditioning for other people's stuff and waiting for something good and authentic to come along to me. So that's kind of how this ended up coming to be.
Thank you so much. I so appreciate the fact that you talked about the two different career choices that people make in this world, like you only can do one thing. And that is something that I wrestled with for a very long time. I also wanted to say thank you so much for coming out. This is New York City, you could be anywhere. And the fact that you're here is just so wonderful. We all really thank you for it. I started off as a writer. I see myself as a writer, even as a little kid. I had a little newsletter, the family newsletter. I would eavesdrop on all the conversations and then type it up on this big manual typewriter. Of course, it only lasted through one edition when they found out that I was selling all the family business. So I've been a writer for a long time. But I used to put on plays, and I was a producer as well, because I would charge people for admission and then charge them for the popcorn and hot dogs, at the play, and cast my brothers and sisters. And I was a horrible producer because I never paid them anything. But one of the things that happened was because my life sent me into activism, I went into law. And so as a social justice attorney, which is something that was part of my background, and as a writer and a playwright, I kept those two lives separate. And because the people in theater never woke up before noon, they never knew that I was going to work as a lawyer during the time part of the evening, staying up until 12 o'clock at night with them. So it was like a difficult, kind of juxtaposition, that I kept these two, because I didn't think the lawyers would take me seriously if I was a playwright and they knew about it, or the playwrights, of course, because they were all broke, would get upset if you actually had a job that paid your rent. So having to keep those lives separate for a while, and then after a while, it's like, I'm a whole person, and I need to bring this. So I decided to come out of the closet to both of those and outed myself. And what happened basically was they didn't take me seriously. and a lot of the people in theater resented me because I had this other career, and they didn't think I was a legitimate artist. But, I've always been an artist. And so trying to express myself in different genre, whether or not, because I write books, I write essays, I write poetry, I do a number of different things in the arts. And I decided to take one of my plays during the pandemic and make it into a film piece. And so that was my first film, but I was also a screenwriter, and Big Apple in 2021, my screenplay, which is an action screenplay. Yes, I have a kick-ass, main female character who tries to kill as many people as they do in Die Hard. Because I was like, why can't she kill people? The men do. And so basically he was like, yeah, let her kill him. And so, and that was a semifinalist in Big Apple. So that's how I got to know it. And the screenplay, the film I'm doing now, that is so exciting. It had its debut in Luanda, Angola, because it's filmed in Luanda, Angola. So as a producer, I had to write, and then I had to produce and have a film crew in another country that I financed to do all these things, because I wanted to see this Queen and Nzinga come to life. So as a writer, though, it was very difficult, because I'm writing for me and writing for a person who lived in the 1600s. So that took a lot of research. So that's another part that many writers may need to know more about, how you go about researching it, so that you actually have that authenticity of the time frame in which you're setting your piece.
When I was a kid, I'll just very briefly tell you that I always thought I was going to be an actor, and I did a lot of acting when I was young. I even did a lot of theater. I sang a lot. I actually sang in the children's chorus at the Metropolitan Opera, if you can believe that. And then I got older, and I realized that's going to be really hard. So I stopped doing that, and I found myself in a career in advertising, and that lasted 23 years. I produced a lot of TV commercials and content, including the Dos Equis Most Interesting Man of the World campaign, which you may be familiar with. Did that for a long, long time. And as I was in the middle of that career, I realized, you know what, I'm really not enjoying this either. I really wanted to go back and figure out how I could get closer to the entertainment world. And that's when I started taking writing classes again. I took writing classes at night at School of Visual Arts. I actually wrote an animated musical comedy about my experiences in advertising called Advertising the Musical, which I wrote all of the songs. I wrote the lyrics to all the songs. I did the whole thing. I even brought in someone from the Book of Mormon to do one of the demos and sing on it. It was a lot of fun to do. Unfortunately, I pitched it around. I couldn't find a lot of people who were interested in an adult musical comedy, animated musical comedy about advertising. It's okay. It's still on the back burner right now. But when the pandemic started, I really wanted to go and figure out if this was something I could do full time, and that's what I did. And I've been writing now, for about 10 years. And then after the pandemic ended, I said to myself, I want to make something that's something that I can write and produce on my own, not something that, as a producer, when I was in advertising, that was my role. I was not a writer. I was not the creative person in advertising. I want to be the person who actually writes it and is responsible for the creative content. And that's what I did. So I hired all of my friends from advertising, many of whom were on the production side, including somebody else, Andy Curry, who's going to speak in the next lecture. You'll see the next panel, who's the director. And we were at a Fish cover band show in New Jersey, and I said to him, hey, what do you think about this idea? And he said it was fantastic, and that's the film that we wound up making, called Driven Out. And it was just a wonderful experience to get to make a film, finally, that was something that I wrote, and that I produced, and I made, and I got many of my friends to come in from the production world of advertising to then be on the crew and on the post-production side of it. And I had all of my experience as a producer to draw upon, and then understand exactly how to make something. I already knew it. So even though I'd spent all this time in a career that I wasn't thrilled about, I knew how to do it. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I knew how to make a budget. I knew how to do the schedule. I knew all the roles of the people on set. And I knew that now, even though I was hiring these people to do it, I knew that I didn't really want to be the hands-on line producer. I brought in somebody else to do that. And I made a film, and I was really proud of it, and I was very excited. And now I'm moving on to writing more things. I live out in Montclair. I was responsible through the Montclair Film Lab. We now do table reads out there. They never did them before. I brought in professional actors to read at the Montclair Film. We end every semester with a table read with professional actors, which is a new thing that they haven't done. And we're trying to build that up and make it into basically an industry event every semester, so that we can have industry folks come in and showcase the work, both for the writers and the actors. So it's been a really fun experience for me. So hopefully that makes sense to all of you.
A lot of you talked about this already. I mean, one thing I think that's all connecting us in this room is not everyone started going, I know I'm going to be a filmmaker. In fact, none of you did. And so we all have these kind of multi-hyphenate careers. We have these ways in which we've had to navigate, and it's just amazing how you've all embraced that. You've embraced the skills you had and then gone on to find your own voices and to be able to have these incredible films that you've all made. And I do want to say, I know we have not seen these films yet. I don't believe, Dan, your film is not premiered yet, right?
No, not till the 11th.
Okay, so these are all coming up. We've got a short film that's really character and dialogue based with Sunny Side Up. We've got a doc that has this beautiful poetic element as well. And then we've got more of a genre concept, kind of sci-fi thriller. And so all three of them, of course, have these different tones. And so I really do encourage you to check them out. They're beautiful pieces, but obviously it was not easy to get here. And I know some of you already spoke about the challenges that you faced, but is there anything else you can elaborate on the challenges that you have either faced in your careers or perhaps in making this film? I mean, you were in yours, you filmed yours in another country, and you're, trying to take off your producer hat, put on your writer hat, navigate those intricacies. So what challenges do you think you could share with the group that might help them understand that these are, good adversities, but also just to give some insight as to how hard this business is?
I wrote it, and then I was just gonna donate my eggs and then take the money from the egg donation, and then that's what was going to pay for the film. Luckily, we found an investor, and I didn't have to do that. I did end up donating my eggs to pay for all the film festival submissions, so it did end up paying for part of the film. So I did have to do it a little bit, but so I was able to find someone who paid for a majority of the film. But that was just the original plan, and I wasn't even going to do any kind of crowdfunding because I didn't know how to do it. And I'm someone who's so bad at asking for help, and that is one thing that I learned, and that's one thing that I really do love about filmmaking is that you can't do it by yourself, and there's a lot of me in it as the writer and as the face of it, and I also was the one who edited it. That I, anywhere that I could have done it just because I was scared to ask someone else to do it, I was like, I'll just do it. But there's such a vulnerability in getting help from people and trusting someone else with something that can feel like your baby, and asking people to buy in. And one thing that was just really difficult for me, but also really nice, was seeing the amount of people that volunteered their time or were able to work below their day rates, or just said I really love this script and I want to be a part of it. I don't care how, and we're willing to drive across the country to PA for free and clean eggs off the walls for fun because they wanted to, and that was just really because I wrote it into the scripts that they were doing that, and I was sorry. And so stuff like that I think was just challenging for me, feeling asking for help and asking for people to get on board, but it wasn't a challenge because people wanted to, and people being a part of things and being a part of things that they think are going to be good, and so it was, I think, me dealing with that, and it ended up great, and I got really lucky and had a really fantastic team that wanted to see it succeed as much as I did, so that was really cool.
I have to say three major things. One, shout out to Bobby Field, my director, who lives in LA. And so I worked with him on my first project. We were given a grant through the Pulitzer Center to work on that project. And so we got along so well together. As a playwright and someone who was producing, I did have a vision of what it is I wanted. I had traveled to Angola to do research for one of my books. I've written 7 books. I have a new book coming out, A Protest History of the United States. And these are all legal history books and other types of books like that. And She Took Justice, A Black Woman, Law, and Power begins with Queen Nzinga. And because people really don't read that much anymore, and my late mentor used to be on me all the time. It's you write all these books and essays and all these things. People don't read, right? It's after sitting for years writing a book and researching it and everything, that's not what you want to hear. And so I always, in college, I took a cinema verite class, and I was really immersed in this idea of reality, but with an edge to it. And so I said, for her, I'm going to try to do a film. I'm going to work with the film director I had before because we got along so well. I'm going to do this in another country. And I traveled to Angola in 2019. And, one of those things where we're sitting here and you're going, did we really do this? Because you go into a zone, right? And it's you don't even know it's not possible until after you're in the zone and out of it going, did I really do that? How did that come together? I can't believe I actually did this. And so even now I'm sitting here going, I can't believe it. So the writer in me had written a book, and I wanted to highlight her. So I used the basis of that book as the structure for the film. Then I sent the book out to different people trying to get financing, saying, you know, if you read this book, but then once again in LA, they really don't read. Sorry, LA. But, you know, and so I'm saying, what am I going to do? So I went ahead and put the structure together, and I was so blessed because I do speaking engagements, and every time I needed money, I didn't have any eggs to give. But every time I needed money, I would get a speaking engagement. And it was just such a blessing for the airline tickets. Each time I was just really blessed. And so those blessings came through. And the third was getting out of my comfort zone. Because being in a profession, it's difficult to then turn around and say, I'm starting from scratch. So Lighthouse in Denver, Lighthouse Writers Workshop, shout out to them. I took screenwriting classes with Jenny Whitehorn there, just to see the structure of what I wanted to do, what was possible. And since I was already a playwright, I had that in mind. But this is a different thing, in coming together and trying to tell a story. And trying to get and because it also deals with slavery, and Queen Nzinga fought the Portuguese to try to stop the slave trade. I mean, when she's a warrior princess queen, I mean, she led men into battle in the 1600s. And trying to capture that, and it includes like the former Miss Angola, I just happened to meet. So all these happenstance things would come to play that really made this project happen. And I went to Angola 3 times. And having to finance all that and having, you know, all the different parts of it to come together and the sound mixing and everything else that I knew nothing about. And I just had to trust that my director would find the right people, that he would do what was necessary, because the writer part of me, producer part of me had limits. I didn't know the rest of that. And so he and I were really great collaborators when I'm telling him my vision. And there were times when our visions didn't come together. But you know, overall it did. And getting out of my comfort zone, I think as a writer, was really difficult, but I had to just make that commitment and say, yeah, I know about this, I know about that, but I don't know the other. I've got to trust these people are going to do the best job possible with my work.
I too considered selling my eggs. My wife works in the public health sector, was kind enough to explain to me that wasn't going to be possible. So I moved on to other sources of financing at that point. So yeah, you know, I think a lot of, you know, you talk about trust. I think that's a really important topic, because you as the person who's starting off a film project, so much of it is in your hands. You have to kind of shepherd this project along and make sure that it gets produced, to make sure it gets made. And that's a really challenging thing. You don't realize how much responsibility that is until you take it on. And even for a short film, a small film, there's so much that needs to be done. And you know, I have a background in producing, so I kind of understood it on a very foundational level. But then when you have to do a film that has really, you don't have the support staff that you might have if you're working for a production company, or even your own, you know, you're working for a corporation of some kind, and you just say, oh, I'm gonna make a film. Well, that sounds wonderful on the surface, but then you realize, wow, I have a lot of things to do by myself. And if you're not working with a solid team, or even if you're just, when you start out the project, it's you gathering your people and finding your crew and getting the people who are going to help you throughout the entire process. And that's really a tremendous amount of work. And then you get those people, and you have to trust those people, and you interview them, you talk to them, you make sure that they're the kind of people who, you know, when you're in a foxhole, they're going to be able to assist you throughout the entire process. And then it's trust. It's making sure that you know that they're going to help you out no matter what. And you're lucky, they all will. And I'm very grateful to folks who I was able to bring onto my project, because they did. They were all just wonderful. One of them's in the back of the room now. There's Andy Curry, who directed my film. And it's a great feeling when you know that they're all going to be there for you. They're doing things without you even asking. You're stepping into a room and all of a sudden, oh my goodness, they're doing the hair and makeup on somebody. They're locking up the street for you, and it's not even their job. It's all those kinds of things that you go, wow, I am blessed that these folks are on my team right now. So that's a really wonderful feeling. I lost my lead actress the night before we were supposed to shoot because we had a scheduling issue with weather. So I had to find a new actress literally the night before. And I live around the corner from a famous couple, and I printed out a treatment and a script, and I knocked on this person's door. They probably thought I was a lunatic, and they might have been right. But anyway, I knocked on the door. Nobody answered. I wound up getting somebody in a different capacity. But these are the responsibilities you take on when you're trying to produce a film. So that was definitely one of my darkest moments I've ever had.
I mean, that is brave. And I think we all have to be very brave to make films. I think all of you just shared some brave things for sure. This is a writer's panel, so I do want to just kind of talk to each of you individually just for one question each about the way you approached writing your film, because I think a lot of people in the room are writers or interested in writing, and you all really do have such different films. So once again, I know you haven't seen the films, but I'll give you a bit of a backstory on the approach that at least I saw from watching these amazing pieces. And then I encourage you to see them when they come to the BAFF Film Festival in a few weeks. So for you, Melissa, for writing Sunny Side Up, I love the banter. It's a two-person, one location, dialogue heavy, wonderful 20-minute ride. And so I'd love to just know your inspiration and also what did you love about writing this script and these characters, and do you have a way into your approach as a writer, especially when it comes to really character-based pieces? Are you starting with a big idea of something you're trying to say? Are you starting with a seed of who you want these people to be and the relationship you are exploring? Or is it something else I haven't thought of?
Yeah, with Sunny Side Up in particular, it's actually the whole idea was based on an acting exercise that I did in 2016 with a partner that me and him had developed, and it's the exact same concept, which is a girl shows up to this one night stand. She's 9 months pregnant, and surprise to him, whoops. We were treating it like a comedy performance, and our acting teacher was upset because we weren't taking it very seriously, and we weren't. And so she told us to improv it, and she said, get rid of the lines, just improv it. She whispered something to my scene partner and didn't tell me what she instructed him to do, and she said, start it. So I knock on the door, he opens the door, looks at me, and says no, and walked away. And that's how it started, which is the big rule of improv, you don't say no. And so I went, and I've never felt so helpless before. But he left the door open. He left his apartment door open, physically leaving the door open for more conversation. And I just thought that was such a badass way to start a scene. With that weird juxtaposition of saying no, walking away, but leaving something open for more conversation, and then putting something in my hands of do I walk in? I hardly know this guy, but I'm also carrying his child. And I thought it was rich with conflict. And one thing in every single script writing class I've ever done, the only feedback I ever get is awesome dialogue, and then 2 people, 1 location, 1 apartment, and 1 fake pregnancy belly. I was I can afford that. And so that story, I was let's write it, and let's see how she can take that no into okay, I'll help you raise this child, and how can we do that? And so it was a lot of rewrites, but I figured out how to make that interesting and dynamic, and figured out who those characters were, and why someone would say yes, and why someone would keep a child, and without telling the father, and discovering what those whys were was, I think, really fun for me and really interesting.
I'll take the mic back as well, that was a question.
Yeah, I mean, it really has this idea of like this character trying every tactic in the book to achieve this goal. And so it's a beautiful script. And also just a reminder that improv classes or acting classes can be great tools for writers as well. Like you're talking about getting out of your comfort zone, just going and putting yourself in the shoes of an actor, just of, we're all telling stories, it's just from the different perspectives. What a great way in for a source of inspiration, because you don't know where it's going to come from. And then for you, for Gloria, I mean, writing a doc is not something a lot of people talk about. And I'm just curious, obviously you spoke about taking great classes and thinking about how you wanted to structure the story. And it really does have such a great narrative and beginning, middle, and end. And like I said, it's poetic through line. But is there any advice you'd give or things that you took away, now having it finished, about how you think about the piece as a whole now, but from a writer's perspective? And are you planning docs in the future, and will you approach it in a similar way when it comes to how you want to kind of pre-script or post-script, right? A lot of docs are made by getting those interviews in the can and then going through the transcription process and then piecing the story together. So I'd love to know what your process was as a writer.
Thank you. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next as far as filmmaking. This morning, I was trying to get the poster together for this film. So, and trying to upload it and where is it going to be printed. There's just, as you said, there's so many big things, little things that you have to do with each of these projects. But as I said, I wrote the book, She Took Justice, A Black Woman, Law, and Power, that starts with Queen Nzinga and goes up through African-American women who have done tremendous things that no one really knows about. So part of my quest was to take this real-life story, Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba was a real-life person who negotiated a peace treaty in 1622 with the Portuguese. And when they broke it, she went to war to stop, in her effort to stop the slave trade, lived to be 80 years old. She was never captured and was so feared, they actually created a statue in her honor. By the end, she had killed so many Portuguese. I know I was talking about killing before. I was like, women seem to be killing a lot of folks in my, I had to think about that theme and perhaps speak to someone. But one of the things that I found was in telling the story, I wanted to tell the story based on the facts, the research that I'd done to create the book, going to the archives in Angola. But at the same time, I wanted to show Angola back in the 1600s as well, which was called Ndongo at that time, and it was changed to Angola. That also in juxtaposition to what Angola is today, having gone through a civil war and everything. When I traveled to Angola the first time, I went by myself. I didn't know anyone. I just showed up. I planned. I'm an obsessive planner, as we must be. And so I chose my hotel, but I didn't know anyone there. And so getting the interviews, I didn't know how the story was going to come together that would be of interest to other people. And then I realized the connection between the 400th commemoration of the Africans arriving in the Virginia colony in 1619 coincided with my filming. And the connection between the first Africans to arrive in Virginia were from Angola. And most people don't know this. And so for me to connect the Angolans today with Queen Nzinga of that time was a great bridge for the African American community, for other communities as well. So that was like the through line I was trying to get to, that healing through line. And the people I wanted to interview, and I've seen it some docs where, you're trying to bring the humanity. What's the common element of humanity? And the connection between the past and the present in a country of immigrants is something that to better understand where we come from and how we got here. And I wanted to do it through my life as I'm telling the story and trying to figure out how my descendants were they still have from the 1400s, the fort where they kept the enslaved people before they put them on the ship. And to be able to stand there, and it gives me chills, I don't want to get emotional, but to actually stand at the gate of that fort and look into that place that was called the Door of No Return in Ghana and other places. Once you left, you never came back. and to stand there and know my ancestors were there, and just trying to get that feeling, but at the same time, look at the little children who were playing, around the fort, and who have no idea what this fort represented. And to do it in a short doc, with my budget and all of that coming together, I mean, I look at it now and it's like, I don't know, do people get it? I don't want to be heavy-handed. I wanted to put the history in there and have other people tell the story, but at the same time, I wanted it to have a dramatic arc, and since I didn't go to film school, I did go to Sarah Lawrence in playwriting. So I at some points I'm like, I just wish I had somebody to come in and tell me, what I should do better as a writer, because I'm a writer doing this. I'm like, did I do that right? Or, from a filmmaker standpoint. And so that was the major challenge I had in trying to make the dramatic arc one that would be of interest to other people, not too heavy-handed, tell the story, have a dramatic intent, have some fun places in there too. It's like slavery, oh, it's so sad. But know that the life spirit of people was still there. So all of that I'm trying to jam in at 29 minutes and 58 seconds. So as a writer, it's easy. And based on true story, because there's gonna be always somebody saying, that didn't happen exactly this way. The way I researched it, it was the other way. And then you have to say something to them. But the major concern was trying to stay with the facts, have dramatic intent, write it in a way that was interesting to the audience, step back and see, is it me or is it the story, the object of the story that's being told here? And have all that happen in a way that makes cinema.
You did it.
You'll see.
I'll grab the mic back. I mean,
I think the doc is beautiful. I think you did I think you hit it all. And don't we all wish we had someone to tell us you're doing a good job? I mean, it's so isolating being a writer and a filmmaker, and all of you haven't just written your pieces. You've acted in them, you've produced them, traveled across the world, you produce them as well, right? You're bringing on people that you trust. So just know, I think we can all start a group where we can then just tell each other, today you're doing a good job. I don't care what you did, but you did a good job. And you did, and I really encourage everyone to see it because I found it to be extremely educational, but also extremely inspiring. And I think it's a subject that I had no idea. I would never have known about this. So thank you for sharing it with the world. And Dan, last for you, for a genre film, which you're so in right now, sci-fi, concept-driven, it's all anybody talks about, all anybody wants out there in that big studio world. I'd just love to know quickly your approach to the piece. And also, was there any sources of inspiration? Did you look at comps or other pieces that you were interested in using as a way to jump into this world? Because it's a really well-crafted screenplay, and I'm excited to hear, just what you had as a source of inspiration.
Thank you.
Sure. By the way, Gloria, if you want, my dad's a therapist. If you want to talk to him about killing women, it's fine.
No, not killing women.
Or
Women
killing. Pardon me.
See, maybe you should
Yes,
go.
I do. I've been in therapy a long time. And we probably partly for the inspiration for my film, which is having a rough high school experience. I think there's a general theme in my writing of revenge and comeuppance, and I think that was probably part of it. And I think I think everyone has their own high school experience. They have their own childhood experience, whether or not you maybe didn't get have such a great time when whether you weren't the coolest kid in class, whether you weren't picked for all the sports teams, whether you were, like, for me, for instance, I was in the theater a lot when I was in high school, and theater right now is pretty cool, right? You have shows like Glee and all this stuff, and it's like, oh my God, the theater kids are cool. Not so much when I was in high school, right? I was like the one kid who was singing and doing all that kind of stuff, and I got picked on. And it was a lot different, believe me, when I was in high school in the 80s. So I think something for me, it was a little cathartic to write a story about something like that, where this one guy who probably represented a lot of the kids that I knew in high school who weren't so nice to me back then and didn't think that I was the coolest or the most popular. And, you know, I think we all go through that stuff and we fantasize a little bit about like, wow, what would it be like if that kid got what was coming to him, right? So yeah, there was definitely an element to that, but I think there was also, for me, as you know, I when I was talking it over with Andy, my director, this whole idea of technology, right? There's the whole idea of Ubers and Lyfts and all that. That we have these things on our phones now. We can press a button and a car shows up and we get in and we trust the fact that it's going to be fine, right? Well, is it? I don't know. Well, we're just going to get in the car and we're going to trust the driver. And we're going to think that this person is going to take us to our destination and that's not going to be a problem. Technology changes over time. It affords us all sorts of things that we didn't have in the past, and it all seems like it's going to go swimmingly well if we trust it. But we have to trust it. So that's, I think, a common theme for me that, you know, people have compared my film to a Black Mirror episode or Twilight Zone and those kinds of things. So the technology mixed in with a person who maybe doesn't use it responsibly, or someone who, you know, if you watch the film, there's a moment when the person who gives him the tip on this former classmate gives him the tip on the rideshare service, he kind of has to make a decision whether or not he wants to do this. And he knows that he's kind of sending him to a terrible place. And so that's his moral dilemma. And so that combined with the technological aspect of it was something that I was very interested in, for sure.
Thank you. I turned it off. It's fun.
Well, it worked beautifully, and I did notice that moment of decision, and I thought it was a beautifully acted moment, and directed and written and all of it. There was a real clear intent, and I thought you captured that really well. And it's certainly in the Black Mirror world, so if that's your vibe, I would highly recommend checking it out. Lastly, before we open it up to the audience, and we'll keep it brief just because I've got off the cuff and asked you all specific questions because I was so excited about your films. If you had to sum up maybe 30 seconds of advice for the folks in this room, the folks out there who are eager to break into the screenwriting world or elevate their careers as a writer, is there one piece of advice you might want to give?
Okay, no, it's good. I would say don't wait for permission to make your art. I think that very often I'm like waiting for signs or waiting for something to tell me to start doing the thing, or waiting. I think as an actor though, I'm like also like waiting for like to get cast or to get chosen. And I think taking your career into your own hands and just making it and doing it and not waiting, but just sitting down and starting it. And it's really hard and you have to be very self-motivated, but just not waiting for that outside sign, but looking in yourself.
I would say write from your passion, because so many nights, days are going to come when you're not going to want to do this. But if you already have the passion inside to do it, it will keep you going throughout the whole project. And you'll put to your mind this question: how can I get this money? Where will my people come from? And ask this great computer or brain of yours, and it will come up with creative ideas. But if it's coming from a passionate place, I would say write that down and keep a notebook, keep your ideas in one place so that you can keep going to that same notebook with your ideas in it. And every time you get a new idea, jot it down in that notebook so it's all in one place. And the last part is, I would say that the research is always good. It adds layers to whatever work you're doing to actually do some research on it. And it's so easy just to go online and find some facts that will add the layers of authenticity to whatever the subject is. Even if it's something sci-fi, if it's speculative, whatever it is, when you add that extra research to it, it connects to the audience, I think. It connects to the people who are reading it. It helps it to elevate it to another level.
I would say two things. one, first of all, make sure there's an emotional quotient to your writing. That whenever you're writing something, that it, even if it's a comedy, even if it's, something very light, that there's an emotional bent to it, because that's what connects with an audience. Whenever you're watching something, there has to be something that people connect with, they empathize with, that they feel strongly about when they're watching it. Otherwise, it's just fluff. It's just something that they don't feel any real connection to whatsoever. The other thing I would say is, if you're writing, write through the pain. And what I mean by that is, writing's really hard. It's not a fun thing. You're sitting there by yourself all the time, staring at a computer. There's no one to turn around and talk to. So it's real easy to stop. It's real easy to just go, I'd really rather just go and watch TV, read a book, go outside for a walk, whatever it is that you want to do. But if you can get over the hump of that urge and keep going, you'll eventually get to some sort of epiphany within your writing. You'll get to that moment where you're like, oh, that was a really good thing that I just wrote. It was really great. I'm really proud of that. And that little spark will lead you to another and another and another. And at the end of the day, you'll be so much happier that you did that rather than went outside or watched a TV show or did any of those other things, those mundane things that are a lot easier to do, but you won't be proud of them at all. So, right through the pain.
Can I add one quick thing? Watch a movie and use just closed caption. And see what the dialogue, see what the writing is, and just closed caption without hearing any of the rest of that. And that's what the writing is that you're doing.
I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions, if anyone is interested. Yes.
So, I'm a writer-director. My name's Matt. Thank you all for speaking today. Really great stuff. I have trouble relinquishing that directorial position. When I write, I want to see the project through, and while the process involves a lot of people, I'm still there, producing, directing, on the shoot day. You guys are all writers. You didn't direct your project. How did it feel when somebody else comes in and implements their creative process into this? Like, did your work stay similar? Is there anything different? How do you guys feel about how things ended up? Because it, kind of sometimes is out of your control where it's going to go after the writing process.
Yeah. Well, my really good friend and co-collaborator, Lexi Brown, directed my project, and I was acting in it, and so I didn't want to have the pressure of directing this project too. Like, I wanted to be able to go in and focus on what I was doing, and I felt it in the vein of being the one editing it and being on the production team and having my hands in a lot of things. Relinquishing that directing control was something that scared me, and it was something was really difficult. But I think finding people that you trust and that know your vision and that you can talk to and that you can see eye to eye with and that think with the same brain that you do is one of the most invaluable things as an artist. And I think finding those people is very rare, but once you do, I think it's important to hold on to those people. And I think that's what I found with her. And whenever we talked about it and when we were finding things like locations and when we were when she was developing storyboards and shot lists, the whole time, when she was showing me things, I was she gets it. And, and it's different because I was also acting in it. And so, I was there with, my own voice, obviously, in front of the camera. And so the whole thing was, a collaboration. But I got to let her, do her thing, and she got to let me do my thing. And so it's a trust fall in a way. But I also think that collaboration always helps art. And when it's just you alone in your room doing your one thing, then you kind of step back from it and realize maybe I should have changed something And so maybe I should have listened to that outside voice that saw something that I was too close to the project to see. And so I think having those outside voices will always help. And knowing like when it's time to say like, actually, no, like I am gonna like pull rank and say like, this is really important to me. And knowing when to say that and knowing when to say like, no, okay, actually like I do trust like this outside voice and this outside opinion. I'm gonna like relinquish control is like a nice ebb and flow to figure out, but I think it's important.
Thank you.
Yes.
When you're pitching or selling your script or idea, how much of it are you actually giving away, and like when do you like stop explaining like everything about it, like all of those types of elements?
Yeah, so the question is about pitching or selling your scripts. Yeah, can you speak to that, Gloria?
I can speak to the pitching part because my book, She Took Justice, A Black Woman, Law, and Power, begins with the story of Queen Nzinga, but it has dozens of other stories there too. So I've done the Hollywood Pitch Fest, I've done other pitches, and basically they only give you a certain amount of time. They want to know the log line. And then they want to know basic facts that they ask you about. So once you give a log line, you give a quick synopsis that's already memorized. You have to have it really able to be said to them in a conversational manner. They'll ask you other questions. They're only going to dive but so deep. Then someone might ask you for a Bible, which is going to be very detailed and a lot of information. You've got to decide how much information you want to give them. They might ask you for an outline. They'll ask you for different things, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not you should give them to them. Most people fear that their ideas are going to be stolen. I still think a few ideas around Queen Nzinga seem to travel in certain times after my pitch. I'll just leave it at that. But it's one of those things where at some point you're going to have to give up something in order to get your project going further. And they say that there's so many projects out there that are similar. You can never say exactly that they took your idea. And we know that with the Matrix and so many other things that people have had ideas that they pitched and they feel those ideas were stolen. Did I turn this on? I mean, I would basically say that, give them the information they want offhand, have an agent. And that's so difficult because most people say, well, I've got to go further in order to get that agent, and then the agent wants you to go. So it's like a chicken egg kind of thing with getting an agent. But I would go to some of the pitch fests with your log line, with your synopsis, and that's the basic information that you're going to give them. When you start getting into the detailed structure of your whole screenplay, one, that's further down the line, and they usually don't ask for that up front. So if you're dealing with somebody that's asking that on the front end, they might be a little shady.
Do we have time for one more? No, Jonathan's around. We're at wrap-up time? We are at wrap-up time, but I don't know if everyone is available to maybe hang out for a second after if you want to say hello. I also know there's an amazing second panel starting, but I just want to say thank you to these amazing panelists. We can give them a round of applause. And we hope that you will follow these films on social media, and their names and projects are in the link that you used to sign up. And thank you again to Jonathan Lipp and the Big Apple Film Festival for hosting this. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. We do have a director's panel starting in 5 minutes, so if you want to stick around for that.